Biblical wonders of our world is facing an almighty crisis. The Dead Sea is drying up.
Well, the Dead Sea is a natural wonder, a biblical landmark, and a mineral treasure.
The Dead Sea was never supposed to come back to life. For thousands of years, it stood as a symbol of God's judgment, so salty that not even a microbe could survive. No fish, no plants, no chance of life. But now, something impossible is happening. Fresh water is breaking through the cracks, vegetation is growing, and in pools just steps from the shore, fish are swimming, exactly where the Bible said it would happen. Scientists are stunned. Believers are watching, and Ezekiel's 2,500-year-old prophecy may be unfolding under our eyes. But that's not even the most shocking part. For centuries, the Dead Sea has carried one reputation: death. The salt levels are so extreme that a fish dropped in its waters would die almost instantly. No coral, no weeds, not even bacteria can survive in its dense, mineral-rich depths. Travelers floated on its surface, not because of wonder, but because life simply could not sink into it. Its very name became a warning, a reminder of judgment and finality. It sat at the lowest point on earth, like a scar no one expected to fade. And yet, the prophets of old spoke differently. Ezekiel wrote of a day when water would pour into this lifeless basin, when salt would break, and when creatures would return as a sign of something greater. For generations, that sounded poetic, until cameras started capturing the unthinkable, because the ground beneath the Dead Sea is changing, and it's not happening slowly. The first sign wasn't life. It was collapse. As the Dead Sea began shrinking, losing more than 3 feet of water every year, the shoreline didn't just recede, it broke apart. Massive sinkholes started ripping open the earth, swallowing roads, farms, and buildings without warning. What looked like destruction was actually exposure. Beneath the cracked salt crust, something hidden was forming. Scientists mapped more than 6,000 sinkholes, each one revealing pockets of water no one knew existed. At first, researchers assumed it was leftover floodwater or trapped rain, but the water inside wasn't salty. It was fresh, clean, flowing. And it wasn't coming from pipes, storms, or runoff. It was rising from below, carving new channels in the same ground believed to hold the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah. The same land once judged was being filled again. But that's not even the most shocking part. It was what started appearing inside it.
They tried to hide it, but now you know. The question is, will you keep it to yourself, or will you let the world see? Hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts below, and share this before the truth is buried again.
When researchers and photographers climbed down into the sinkholes, they expected danger, not discovery. But in several of these fresh pools, they spotted movement. Tiny at first, barely visible against the stone, then unmistakable. Fish. Not dead, not deformed, alive and swimming in clear, flowing fresh water, just steps away from the most toxic salt body on Earth. Some pools had algae, others had small crabs clinging to rocks. Even plant roots were threading through cracks in the stone. What nobody could explain was this: where did they come from? These were not man-made ponds. No rivers transported them. And these pools weren't connected to the Dead Sea at all. They were interruptions in a land once declared lifeless. The images spread quickly. Some said it was environmental change. Others called it a coincidence. But believers saw something else. Ezekiel's river had started somewhere no one expected, and the signs didn't end at the water's edge. Over 2,500 years ago, Ezekiel described a vision that sounded impossible.
He spoke of water flowing east from Jerusalem, down into the Arabah, and reaching a sea so bitter that nothing could live in it. But he didn't say it would stay that way. He wrote, "When the waters flow into the sea, the waters will become fresh, and there will be many fish." For generations, scholars called it symbolic, a metaphor for revival, not a literal transformation. But what do you do when real fish start appearing beside the very sea once believed to be beyond repair? How do you dismiss a prophecy that not only named the location, but described the healing process with uncanny precision? The river Ezekiel saw wasn't just spiritual, it was geographical. And the fact that fresh water is breaking through the ground in the lowest place on earth is only the beginning, because something else is surfacing above the soil.
Around the freshwater pools, something even stranger began to appear. Green. Small plants first, then clusters of reeds and wild growth pushing through cracks where only salt once ruled. In some areas near Ein Gedi, roots are threading into the soil, drawing life from unseen springs beneath the surface. Trees are beginning to appear in places scientists once declared permanently infertile. And without realizing it, researchers are watching another piece of Ezekiel's vision take shape. He wrote that along the riverbanks, trees of every kind will grow, their fruit will not fail, and their leaves will be for healing. No one expected plant life to emerge this close to the Dead Sea, much less in ground collapsing from salt decay. Yet the same land tied to ancient destruction is showing signs of restoration. But this isn't just about plants rising from the dust, because the water feeding them is moving somewhere deeper. For decades, the Jordan River that once fed the Dead Sea has been drying up, diverted for farming, drinking water, and industry. Most experts assumed the Dead Sea would keep shrinking until it vanished into salt and sand. But that prediction didn't account for something unexpected: new water paths forming beneath the surface. In recent years, underground channels linked to the Jordan have begun reappearing, sending fresh water into places no pipeline controls. Some Israeli researchers believe pressure beneath the tectonic plates is pushing water back toward the Dead Sea Basin. That means life isn't being carried in, it's rising from below. And that matches Ezekiel's vision more than anyone wants to admit. Because he never said the salt would be drained, he said it would be transformed. But there's one part of the prophecy people overlook, and it's starting to unfold in silence along the shoreline.
Ezekiel didn't just predict fresh water and fish. He mentioned something even bolder. He wrote, "Fishermen will stand along the shore, spreading their nets from En Gedi to En Eglaim." For centuries, that sounded impossible. You can't fish in poison. You can't cast a net in brine. And no one would ever stand along a shore where nothing could live. But now, as freshwater pools spread and new channels form, parts of the land near En Gedi are softening. Travelers have reported seeing locals exploring areas once too unstable to walk. Some say small nets have already been spotted near freshwater inlets where fish are collecting. It's not commercial fishing yet, but it doesn't have to be. The moment nets touch what was once dead, the prophecy shifts from theory to proof. And yet, something even more ancient lies beneath the shoreline, something tied to destruction, secrecy, and return. The land surrounding the Dead Sea is not just geological, it's biblical ground zero. Many scholars believe this is where Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, erased under fire and salt. And only miles away, in the cliffs of Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, preserving ancient prophecies for a generation that would need them most. Now the same territory once marked by ash and silence is cracking open, filling with water, life, and movement. To some, this looks like climate change. To others, it's the land responding to a timeline older than nations. Because the prophets didn't just speak of restoration, they warned it would connect to a larger shift in the world. And if Ezekiel saw the Dead Sea come alive before everything else he described, then we may already be standing at the opening chapter of the next event he recorded. But that part of the vision is not peaceful.
What's happening at the Dead Sea isn't isolated. It's aligning with patterns across Israel. Earthquakes are increasing along the Jordan Rift Valley. Reports of unusual animal migrations and underground rumblings have surfaced near the salt flats. Some rabbis in Jerusalem believe these signs point to the approach of the Messianic era. Others warn that before restoration comes shaking. And Jesus himself said, "When these things begin to happen, look up, for your redemption draws near." That phrase wasn't tied only to war or political tension, but to changes in the land itself. If fish, trees, and fresh waters are appearing exactly where Ezekiel foresaw, what about the rest of his prophecy? Because after the waters are healed, his vision shifts. It moves from life to conflict, from recovery to a final convergence, and it places Jerusalem at the center of it all. Ezekiel's prophecy doesn't end with water and fish. The healing of the Dead Sea is only one layer in a larger sequence. After the land shows signs of restoration, he describes nations rising, borders shifting, and a final gathering near Israel. The Dead Sea was never meant to be the climax. It was meant to be the signal, a marker that the clock has moved forward. So the question is no longer, is the prophecy real? The real question is, what does this revival open the door to next? Because if water can break through salt and life can emerge from a grave of minerals, then every other part of the vision is suddenly possible. And somewhere beneath the surface, along fault lines, near ancient ruins, under shifting stone, the next stage is already forming. The world is watching the water, but the real trigger may come from what rises behind it.